Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a totally pointless, unnecessary, boring Brahms cycle, courtesy of Michael Sanderling and the Lucerne Symphony Orchestra. Now, some of you heard this and said, "Oh, would you talk about this? It's really very good." No, it's not very good. It's very dull. That's what it is. Although, the interesting thing about it, as with this release now, all of the Sanderling father and two sons have made Brahms cycles. Daddy made two of them, I think. Yes, he did. So, there's lots of Sanderling Brahms out there. So you got to make sure you've got your right Sanderling. The Thomas Sanderling Brahms cycle, I don't think that's around anymore. It hasn't been around for like decades. Kurt Sanderling's, his great one is with the Staatskapelle Dresden, but he redid it with the Staatskapelle Berlin, and it wasn't very interesting. And this is not very interesting. So, they're not like, batting 1,000, the Sanderling crew. But in this particular case, first of all, the Lucerne Symphony Orchestra is so not a great orchestra. They're not terrible. Nobody's terrible these days, right? But they just have very little to recommend them. In terms of corporate sonority or individual virtuosity, or the brass section particularly is very undistinguished. Oh my goodness. Although that's probably Sanderling's fault too, because the one sort of prevailing characteristic of these performances is this sort of extraordinary transparency between string and wind choirs, but at the same time a baseline mezzo something or other lack of dynamic contrast. And so yes, there is a certain amount of detail that you hear. But on the other hand, it's like instead of having one congealed, gloopy group of instrumental forces, which Brahms can sound like very easily because his orchestration is rather thick, you have two gloopy, congealed, battling forces of instrumental sonority. And it's monotonous. Everything about these performances is monotonous. First of all, let's be a little more detailed. Sanderling takes the first movements at rather sloggy tempos, and he's not rhythmically very interesting. It's so different from, for example, from the way he conducts Shostakovich. Shostakovich is punchy and full of energy and snap, and there's none of that here. And you'd say, oh, well, of course that's Shostakovich. This is Brahms. Well, that's true. But to create a style of Brahms that makes him sound like Brahms instead of Brahms is bad. There are certain musical verities, and these verities are true no matter, no, that's why they're verities, are true no matter what you're doing. That is, a well-planned dynamic range, sharp accents, attention to, those things, aside from just balance. In other words, Brahms has more in common with Shostakovich in terms of basic musical qualities than Sanderling lets us hear. The first movement of the Third Symphony, first of all, he makes the crescendo on the opening chords, which you shouldn't do. Brahms saves the crescendo for their appearance before the coda. And then it's just heavy and slow. The first movement of the Fourth Symphony, ugh. It's just endless. It's terrible. It's absolutely bad. We don't get much bad. It's so trudgy and so metrically constricted. It's in a straitjacket. It's all tight and it never. The coda is supposed to explode. It just fizzles. The opening of the First Symphony, it's so careful to be not cosmic. And now you don't have to have like an apocalyptic, exordium the way that Furtwängler does it, or the granitic Klemperer, or his dad, Kurt Sanderling. It doesn't have to be that way. Some people like Gunter Vaughn, for example, take it rather quick, just poco sostenuto as written. But you need the clarity. You need to hear the timpani notes really pounding. And here they're just mushy. You need to have, it's so phlegmatic. That's the problem. It's neither fish nor fowl. You don't know what it's going to be. And it's all really irritating. The finale of the Second Symphony never takes wing. And the coda, oh my God, the coda. You could practically learn to play the violin. I mean, while you're doing it, it's just it sounds like some sort of exercise. There's no rush of excitement, and that blast on the trombones at the end, it's it's just not happening. Not happening nowhere. Yeah, there are beautiful things in the slow movements. There's some, niceties of texture and transparency and balance, like I mentioned before. But the big picture is just missing. It's completely droopy. So that's the Brahms symphonies. You do get the Schoenberg arrangement of the piano quartet, which is fun, and that's the best thing here. I mean, it's a good performance. It's they wake up a little bit for it, because how can you not? The orchestration is so kooky. And so they have a little more fun with it, and that's nice. It's still not terribly exciting, but at least it's alert. I mean, which is, the rest of them are certainly not. And then, to absolutely add insult to injury, these are 5 separate CDs. Each symphony gets one full disc to itself, which shows you just how trudgy the tempos must be. And the rest of it, the piano quartet, of course, is its own disc. This is, let's see, Brahms twice visited the city of Lucerne. Once with his father, once with Clara Schumann. He was enchanted by its iconic landscape, charm, and history. These recordings by the Lucerne Symphony Orchestra and chief conductor Michael Sanderling came about in light of this unique historical connection. They must be on drugs. I mean, he visited twice. Therefore, we are equipped to do a Brahms cycle. Sure, absolutely, absolutely ridiculous is what this is. However, this is a Warner release under exclusive license to Parlophone Records Limited. So obviously this was paid for by the Lucerne Symphony and licensed to Warner. So, this is one of those inmates running the asylum productions, right? Because no sane A&R director at a major label would say, gee, we're really lacking a Brahms cycle from Lucerne. Let's do that. Why don't we? I mean, it's so crazy. There's no reason to release it other than the fact that it exists and the label needs something to do and they're getting paid to do it. So they did it. But you don't have to buy it. No reason for that whatsoever. Just because they made it, you don't need to pay for it. And that is my recommendation. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. And excuse Finster. Finster, come here. Okay, the cats are having their morning exercise. Anyway, keep on listening. Take care. Avoid this. We're all good.